Everybody, welcome back for another episode of Healthcare 360. I'm your host, Scott Burgess, and in front of me, I want to give a quick introduction. And this is a friend of a friend who then we became friends, and you know how the story goes. So we had an episode back with, I believe it was episode number 60, if my memory serves me correct, with Dr. Christina Rahm. She blew it up, completely blew it up, and she educated us and taught us things that we thought we knew that we didn't, and other considerations that we needed to take a higher perspective on and bring into the conversation. So she has a large network of people and that she works with. And we also know that she's a pretty brilliant mind at the same time. She takes the time, she does her homework, she does the necessary action steps to make sure that her outcomes are on point. One of her friends is the CEO of the Root Brands, Clayton Thomas. We told you in a couple episodes back that we were going to be sampling and trying two of the products that we'll be talking about today, Cleanslate and Zer0-InOne. Cleanslate has proven to be extremely well accepted into my body, and Zer0-InOne is what I'm going to nickname as the NZT limitless pill that you saw and heard about in the movie. It's that good without any of the side effects or having to slip blood off the ground and all of that kind of stuff. It's amazing. It really does help with the focus. Clay, welcome to the show, brother. Really appreciate you making the time.
Having me, bro. It's a pleasure. As Christina was telling me, and I got to watch a little bit of you guys record your initial conversation with her, but to be able to collaborate with similar minds is always a joy and a blast. So, thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to hang out, and being able to follow her always creates an opportunity to catch up. So
that's a tough pair of shoes to fill, no doubt, no doubt. All right, so let's start off with this. You identified a problem. That problem was,
well, systemic toxicity. And I think the easiest way to explain it is the cause, right? And that's from where I grew up. And I think we are all a culmination of our experiences, right? It doesn't matter if you hold a doctorate, if you hold a master's, or if you're like Christina, where you hold a master's, a PhD, an EDD, a PsyD, and postdoc at Harvard and everywhere else. But all we are as individuals is a culmination or a compilation of our experiences. And I was fortunate to be raised in a veterinary practice. So from the time I was one, really being in clinic and understanding the importance of nutrition and supplementation. But through my process through college, and then when I got out of school and really started studying different areas about 16 years ago, my perspective flipped to, instead of looking at the importance of nutrition, supplementation, lifestyle, but really understanding the importance of detoxification.
Yeah. And
the etiology of almost all of our problems, and it's probably pushing 95% of our problems, are from what's in us that are causing the problems. And it's the foundation. So instead of trying to treat all the symptomology, which is what we've been doing, whether it's nutraceutical or pharmaceutical, really looking at addressing the cause. And I think that was one thing that Christina was hitting on as well, because when we were introduced 6 years ago, it was bringing two philosophies that come from different perspectives. Her biotech background, my nutraceutical background, and seeing from those two poles, what the real problems are and how to create solutions.
Understood. I'm going to stop and take a quick time out and tell everyone my experience today. So last night I was about to have a handful of blueberries. This is going to go to your point, I promise. So I'm about to give her a handful of blueberries, and she looks at me, she goes, "Those are not washed." And so in my head, I'm like, I just want a few blueberries. That's it. So we started using grapeseed extract and fruit cleaner. So today for breakfast, I had my thing of blueberries, but I said, okay, let me put them in water. Let me spray the spray, put the grapeseed extract. Let me let them soak. Clay, when I went back and I looked at that bowl, I was like, holy shit. So to go back to your point about detoxing and the stuff that we don't realize, or that's unrealized, that's being put into our bodies, that's causing systemic problems, you hit the nail on the head. And I bring up that topic really quickly because that happens day in and day out without even realizing it with apple wax, for example, which is the preservative to try and keep them fresher longer in the stores, etc. Even if you're eating healthy. The amount, when I looked at it, I said, I had to dump out the water, rewash it to make sure it all got out before I would even consider put them in my mouth. Yeah. So first off, thank you for thinking that way and acknowledging a problem that you know exists that many people don't know because it's clear and it's invisible.
Well, so, and it's the philosophy that we try to teach now of rethink, right? It's going back and taking that different perspective to everything we've been taught. And I think we're in a time now, because of all of these different matters that are taking place, and whether you call it the spiritual awakening that we're having as a planet, in the financial environments, the political environments, the business environments that we're in, you have these innovators that are taking steps back and going, okay, let's look at this differently. Yeah. And, like you hit on with blueberries. I mean, don't do that with strawberries either, because you'll just throw them away. Right. And whether they're organic or not. But if you take the time, and I've been fortunate to do this for the last 16 years and really go down rabbit holes of environmental toxicology that would freak people out. But our exposure, like you said, is not day by day. It's second by second. 30 cubic meters of air every day are what we inhale. And it is the most toxic substance we're exposed to. And then when you look at the water, and we'll probably dive into fluoride and pineal gland decalcification. Yeah. And then you get into food and then the other things that, are put in our bodies. It's a position that you can freak out, but knowing that there are literal solutions, and if you do this well, everything else that you're concerned about or everything that ails you will not exist, because it can't. And I think that's really the premise. And it's just a matter of taking that different perspective, right? Elon Musk has done a really good job of rethinking, a few different industries. And he's done pretty well on that. Yeah. And continues to innovate. I can say we kind of think the same way. It's disruptive, but it's non-congruent with traditional thinking.
Let's dive into toxicology. You said you did some toxicology that could freak people out. Let's bring it up. What don't they know that they need to know?
Well, one, the glyphosate aspect, but I think the most important thing to understand is mercury, right? Mercury is the worst neurotoxin known to man. It's exposed through fish, the ocean. And this is the key. You're born with it. You are conceived with it. And this is the disconnect that people have. Because when we talk mercury, the first thing people think is, it's in the ocean. It's in fish. It's in adjuvants. It's in all of these different areas. But it's the areas that people don't understand. 30% of the mercury that's in a woman is passed into the fetus. So we had the philosophy for, decades and generations that we are conceived in this pristine environment. We are bathed in fluid that feeds us and helps us grow. But what the Environmental Working Group proved, I think it was 2003 or 2005, that's actually not true. Yeah. We are raised in a toxic cesspool, and our exposure begins there. And one of the crazy things for me is there were two subjects that over the last 16 years I really didn't hit on: Down syndrome and sickle cell anemia. Because they're two that are discussed as genetic conditions. And one of my colleagues that's here in the office with me, she has two nieces and nephews that had Down syndrome. And it caused me to do a little research. And if you go on PubMed, right, or DuckDuckGo as a research tool, but I prefer PubMed because you can look at a lot of the published literature. If you pick a subject, you want to pick autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, cancer, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, dyslipidemia, high cholesterol. Pick the subject and then type "and mercury."
Oh my gosh.
And watch what you find. And this is the key, is that not only is mercury the worst neurotoxin known to man, it's really the second most deadly chemical besides the radioactive isotopes, because dioxin is the only thing more deadly. And we have it all in us. We're all exposed to it from day one. There's no beneficial amount, right? There's no amount of mercury that actually proves to be any benefit in our biology. But it alone makes everything worse. But then you get into the key parts, is you got to get the stuff out, right? It's a heavy metal. It's toxic. It's a neurotoxin. It gets in your brain, your central nervous system. It destroys. Here's the worst part. Every biological system of the body, mercury will disrupt, but it does it differently in every biological organism. And it's so terrible and evil that our methylation process, we talk about MTHFR issues, right? And people go, oh, well, I don't methylate. I have this specific gene that is inactive, folate and MTHFR. Well, it's mercury toxicity that shuts it off. And then it destroys the microbiome of the gut. So it's not only deleterious to every system of your body, but it shuts off your ability to methylate. Mm-hmm. It shuts off your body's ability to produce glutathione. It shuts off your gut's ability to produce dopamine and serotonin. So and it cascades.
Are you saying
it
that
everything worse?
So you're telling that the glutathione, the lack of production thereof because of mercury, is now one of the leading causes or the leading cause for joint disruption?
Well, and this is the thing, is people want to look at the symptom, right? They go, oh, well, I have joint degeneration or I have inflammation in my joints. Great. What's the cause of the inflammatory process? Because we know mercury, other heavy metals, glyphosate, other environmental toxins are extremely inflammatory in the body. They cause negative inflammation. And you and I both can have the conversation going a long time about the effects of positive inflammation in the healing process, whether it's surgery or such. There's good inflammation.
Right.
But the negative inflammation that's caused by mercury and other metals and other toxins. And here's the thing with how bad this stuff is. If you have your joints, right? Mm-hmm. And you're doing activities and you're wearing on your joints, maybe you injure an area, or you cause a little damage to an area. The increase in ionic activity that happens in that area, that is your body trying to heal. That ionic activity acts like a magnet for metals. So the metals get in there, cause disruption. They cause negative inflammation. They slow down the healing process. They cause scar tissue because it doesn't heal properly. So you get back to the etiology and you go, okay, is this a problem because I damaged an area and do I need to supplement this area? Or do I need to clean up the mess and go back to it? Because the key thing you hit on talking about Elon and the research he's doing is silica and silicon, right? And how important that is. Well, clenoptilolite, and we'll get into Cleanslate, but being able to, one, remove the cause of the issue, but then provide and deliver bioavailable silica in its best, most effective form. So you provide the primary building block while removing the bad stuff. It's regeneration and removal. You can't regenerate until you remove. You can't. Yeah. I don't care who we talk to, what industry we talk to, whether they're physician, whether they're carpenter, whether they're firefighter. You can't rebuild a burning house.
Let me stop for a moment. So let me go backwards for a second here. So when we consider our most pristine environment in utero, and where, I don't want to say mercury filled, but we have traces of toxicity through mercury in that pristine environment before we even conceived, one.
Or what? Yeah.
Right? Now, on top of that, it's related to joint inflammation. Yeah, negative inflammation. Inoculative drug therapies are also filled with these heavy metals, which is the first therapy you're getting as a newborn. So it's a double whammy.
Yeah, and in the environment that I grew up in the veterinary world, there is a term, and I don't know if I can use the term without getting filtered. So let me call it maxinosis.
Okay.
Because it's a maximum issue. But the term maxinosis is a term that's been used in veterinary medicine for about 40 years. And it comes from animals, specifically dogs, having neurological issues and having health issues from getting too many of those. And then because of the adjuvants, the heavy metals and other things that are put in there, causing autoimmune issues, cancer, this proliferation of other issues that come from that process.
Yeah.
And wow. I don't know if you've read Evidence of Harm. It was it's funny because the conversations that come out with the issues now, but when the book Evidence of Harm came out, and I think it was 2000 or 2005, looking at the studies from the UK, and they, because of their universal healthcare model, they were really looking at the data and saying, okay, as these issues enter the body because of trying to prevent things, they saw an increase in neurological issues. And what they determined is that instead of using a multi-dose bottle that have these adjuvants, that have thimerosal, which is mercury, in them, they went back to the industry and said, the only way that we are going to continue these programs is if you provide single-dose ampules. So it costs them more money. But because they have universal health care, and it's the country that's footing the bill for health care, and the data shows that you better not do that because it's going to cost us more money, because even the youngest population was starting to have issues that were going to cost them billions over time. They told them, look, 10-dose bottles, not taking a single one of them, only single-dose ampules that don't need those adjuvants. When they did that, numbers dropped. And if you compare the UK to the US for those complications over the last 20 years, you go, dude, this is insanity.
Yeah, no kidding.
This is only talking about mercury. When we throw glyphosate in there, I've had a couple conversations with Dr. Don Huber over the years. I've got a really great interview with him on our YouTube channel. And Don's been the biggest opponent to the use of glyphosate since 1974. And what we were going over is what the data shows currently for what glyphosate does and what it's doing to decrease sperm motility, but also decrease reproductive opportunities in women, whether it's through miscarriage or damage to the uterus and such.
Yeah.
And he made a comment that gave me chills. He's like, the preponderance of glyphosate of what we have right now is an extinction event.
Are you kidding me?
No. And he has the data, because what happens if a population can't breed? They go away.
Wow.
And we are, as humans, we are in the middle of an extinction event, and people don't have a freaking clue. And I asked him, okay,
a lot of sense.
How much farmland in the United States is loaded with glyphosate? Because it's been used since 1974.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if we have organic fields or traditional fields right now, because since 1974, nothing's been organic the entire time. And he said 95% of all the farmland and grassland in the United States is loaded with glyphosate.
Yeah.
The 5% that isn't is grassland up in South Dakota and Montana that they're raising bison and buffalo on because they've never grown anything on it. So every bit of farmland in this country is already loaded with glyphosate.
So regardless of the food source that you're buying, then it doesn't really matter. I want to interject real quick. I'm sorry. But regardless of organic, non-organic, it's all contaminated.
Correct. It might not be used directly on it now, but it's in the soil. It's in the freaking groundwater.
Wow.
Because glyphosate is water soluble. So when it rains, where does the water go? Into the water table. They saturate plants. They saturate everything with glyphosate. Where does it go? It goes into the water table.
Yeah.
So we know in the Gulf of Mexico, because you're in Florida.
Yeah.
They have a red tide issue.
Oh,
right?
yeah. So let me walk you through that real quick. I never experienced red tide up until a few weeks ago. We actually put it on the podcast. We had a really quick episode. It was like 8 or 9 minutes long, our shortest one to date. And we were just riding our bikes on the beach, enjoying our time. Of course, we're in the midst of COVID here. And I'm talking, I'm afraid to cough. And I'm like, why am I coughing? I started challenging myself. Am I getting sick? Is there something happening? And people are looking around. I didn't know that red tide had that much of an impact on your microbiology. It was unbelievable. The red eyes, the nasal, the throat irritation. And we're just riding our bikes on the beach, and people are on the beach. And then I started recognizing after the fact that people were leaving. I'm like, why are they leaving the beach? It's a beautiful day. That's why they were leaving. They couldn't take it.
Well, and you get into the biology of this, right? On how that's happened over the last 20 years and why we've seen it as an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at the proliferation of red tide, where it came from, it's the Mississippi River Delta. Because it's all the glyphosate that's in the Mississippi River that's come from the Midwest, from the farming country, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, all of those places that draw water from the Mississippi, but all of the water tables, the aquifers, they all feed into or feed from the Mississippi. All of that stuff ends up dumping into the Mississippi River, runs into the Gulf of Mexico. And that's why Cancun and the Mexican Riviera has all of these kelp problems now. And it's the same reason that we have the red tide issues in our side of the Gulf, is the glyphosate and all the chemicals have killed the biome or the microbiome of the Gulf. So you see these blooms. Stuff does the same thing in our body. It destroys your microbiome. I mean, you can see the commercials. If you've ever been exposed to glyphosate and you have leukemia or, lymphoma, guess what? We have a settlement for you. Well, every single freaking person should raise their hand. Get your money from Bayer and Monsanto.
Let me ask you this. So aquifers are considered the cleanest and most natural because they have the rocks and the minerals to kind of bump up against to cleanse that water. Are you telling me that that's not happening anymore?
It depends, right? Because as things are going down, and this gets into a fun conversation. I look at the Mayan civilization and the Roman civilizations with what they used to actually cleanse their water.
Yeah.
But there are some things that nature can't filter. The forever chemicals that, are so well talked about now. There's 80,000 different chemicals created every year that are put in the environment. We don't have a freaking clue what they do. But there's glyphosate you can't filter. It just is. And it's that nasty. And then and those are just two things. We're just talking glyphosate and mercury. We're not talking lead, aluminum, cesium, strontium, cadmium. So we can talk about the pet cow effect. You ever study the pet cow effect?
No.
PETKAU.
Okay. PETKAU?
Yeah, it's a law of physics that was created in 1972. But if you want to understand microdosing, that's the secret. It's also it's that process that makes things so powerful, because it's a law of physics that this Russian researcher was looking at. He was researching radiation exposure because of what happened in Ukraine and with Chernobyl and such. And the theory was that a single large dose of radiation was more deadly than small dose exposure over time, right? Because the fallout of Fukushima, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island couldn't be as bad as the initial blast and the exposure. That was the theory. Found out that they were wrong. It's like 4,000 times more deadly to have small dose exposure consistently over time, because the body's unique. And this goes to supplementation as well when you apply it. We take vitamin C. If you take a bunch of vitamin C, you take 5 grams of vitamin C, what happens to your urine? You piss orange.
Yeah.
Because your body goes, holy shit, there's too much of this. I can't use it all. I'm flushing it out. Same thing goes with radiation. You get hit with a big blast of radiation. You get all of that at one time. Your body goes, oh shit, this is bad. We need to get this out. So it will work to flush it. But with small doses, little bits at a time, you know what the body does? It looks at it and goes, I can't use that. I don't think it's supposed to be here. But there's not too much of it, so I'm going to store it and get it away. I'm going to put it in fat. So if we look at radioactive isotopes, what happens is you create ionizing radiation stored in your body consistently and just compounds. That's why dye contrast MRIs are so freaking bad as well, because if you've had multiple, they'll just fuck you up over time. That's why Christy Brinkley is so jacked up. She's suing the pharmaceutical industry over gadolinium poisoning because she's had so many dye contrast MRIs done. So if you know Chuck Norris, we can help Chuck Norris. For the first time, we can help Chuck Norris instead of Chuck Norris helping everyone else. But
wow,
if you apply that in the same way into supplementation and lifestyle, because we're quantum, you don't need a lot of something. You really only need a little bit, and you need your body to identify the energy signature of that and replicate it when it gets internally.
I want to jump forward real quick because I want to get to one of the products, but let's talk about fluoride, and let's talk about the pineal gland. And first off, what the pineal gland is necessary for, and fluoride. Again, everyone on the show and the audience knows that I've spoken about fluoride before in the water, in the mouthwashes, the toothpaste. Get it out. Get out of your house. It's a neurotoxin. But we just seem that it's necessary to make our teeth brighter and whiter, which is not really the truth.
It's even not even sold for that. It's about protecting your teeth, right?
Yeah.
And making them stronger.
The enamel.
And it's funny with the environment that we live in now. Some people are starting to do more research back into history and go, okay, why are we seeing these things? But and we probably won't talk much about eugenics and cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
But the Germans were really, really good at research, and they did some really nasty research, back in the 30s and 40s. And when you look at population control and population management, dumb people are easier to control.
Right.
And they figured out some ways to do that on a systemic basis to control certain populations. And they started putting fluoride in the water supply.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it because it calcifies the pineal gland, and it does it really quickly. And it was funny that when World War II ended, those scientists weren't punished. Their data, Mengele's research, all the research these guys were doing wasn't disposed of. It was acquired. And then it's been applied. And that same philosophy left an environment that was predicated on destroying populations and brought here and made global for the same thing, just spun so people would drink it. And you drink your Kool-Aid.
Let me add a point here about Hollywood for a moment.
Oh.
Yeah. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but if for those who want to go back and watch the original Batman with Michael Keaton. Now, you and I both remember when that first came out. It was back when, DC first entered in. And remember the news anchor talked about, the Joker is trying to contaminate the water with the natural products. Folks, they're telling us right in front of our eyes, thinking that it's propaganda, and it's not. You can still rent, buy that movie, whatever you want to do, but I'm telling you, it's right there. Look it up on YouTube. is right there. They are telling us what they're doing to the stuff that we use every day and the necessary minimal requirement that we need to survive, aka water.
Well, and it's the crazy part with Project Mockingbird and the process of indoctrination that we've been through, that we've been to the point now where they just show you. So you accept the concept and the process. You go, oh yeah, you know what, that's okay. Or that can happen. So subconsciously you accept it because you've already been programmed chemically to accept it.
Right.
And you go, oh, wow, that's bad. Like, you're it. Like, no one's smiling anymore. Everyone's just dull.
So now let's jump into this Cleanslate. It says a lot in the name of the product itself. Cleanslate, what does it do? How does it work? And how long does it take before it maximizes or it brings out the true evacuator system of the body? So I think it's functioning properly.
The source is everything, right? Quality is crucial. And as you know, if you have a genius, you know, to use as a reference, you can usually come up with good stuff, and I'll give her props here in a second. But Cleanslate is derived from nature's most amazing and effective crystal, right? People know about quartz and how powerful it is, and I'm not wearing any of my stuff today, but we know the energetic strength of crystals. And it goes back to what you were talking about with Batman. If you go back another decade, actually 2 decades, Superman would recharge.
Ah, that's right.
In the Hall of Crystals.
Yeah.
Same programming. They're like, these are really powerful, but no one really caught on. They're like, oh, that's really cool. I wish I had a cave of crystals, and now people do.
Right.
But there's a class of minerals called zeolites. And I think many people are familiar with bentonite. You see it marketed. You know, we know quartz. We know asbestos, right? And we know asbestos is not something that we probably want to use because of its molecular structure and its physical structure. It's not one you want to play with. But clinoptilolite is this amazing crystal. It is the most powerful, most unique, most beneficial of the group. But it's been the least understood for the last 100, 200 years. And there's an old adage that success leaves clues, right? And the Romans, during the Roman Empire, had a problem. Their water, as it came out of the aquifers, was loaded with lead. And we know lead is a neurotoxin, not conducive to creating a healthy longevity. And through technology advancements, figuring stuff out, they lined the aqueducts with clinoptilolite, with this crystal, because when they did it, they found that the water tasted better because it's a natural filter. Had been used for a long time. That's been known for a century or more. What's really interesting is in October of last year, researchers figured out that the Mayans, so all the way across the globe, other side of the globe, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, were doing the same thing, that their natural water sources were polluted as well. And I forgot how many kilometers away from the main civilization, there was, I don't know if it was waterfalls or there was a water source that was really pure and really clean because it was running through clinoptilolite. And they also adopted the philosophy. 2 completely separate parts of the world. The Mayans weren't known until the last 5 years or so that they had been doing it.
Clinoptilolite, can that clean glyphosate?
Yes. and this is where the fun part comes in, is so we're using what nature put here to filter the environment. And depending upon your philosophy, you want to talk about it as God doing it or our source energy. When this planet was being terraformed, volcanoes created everything we live on, right? Volcanic eruptions create Earth.
Right.
You know? And volcanic eruptions are also the largest source of exposure to the natural exposure to environmental toxins, which is why when Kilauea erupts in Hawaii, they talk about the VOG issues over there, the volcanic fog, because it's extremely toxic. So, and we know in homeopathy, like cures like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where there's a problem, there's always a cure. So volcanoes are the largest natural source of emission of environmental toxins. In that same eruption process, the ash from these eruptions would create clays like bentonite. It would create crystals like quartz and clinoptilolite. So the ash would mix in different seabeds and lake beds and crystallize over time to create these natural filters. Without the filters, we don't exist. Life, we can't live in an environment where you can't breathe. So there had to be a filtration mechanism.
Right.
Just like with poison oak and poison ivy in the environment, there's a fern really close by that if you rub on the ivy, you can take the fern, rub the seeds, rub that on the site, and it's going to remediate the burn and the itch. Like cures like. Nature's always going to provide. So this has been used for millennia in different areas. It's used in your house. It's used in municipal water systems. The water filters in your refrigerator. The water filters used in municipal systems. The kitty litter you use. All use clinoptilolite. Remember the green bags that came out like 7-8 years ago?
Yeah.
That you could put fruit in to bind nitrogen?
Yeah.
People are like, wow, this is really cool. It sucks out the nitrogen. It's clinoptilolite. It's lined with clino powder. That's what's binding the nitrogen. So it's around us. It's been used in so many different areas. And even the top researchers in the world now are continuing to pump out literature. And they're saying, this is the most powerful crystal on the planet, but we still don't understand everything that it does. Right. And I've been fortunate because I was introduced to this concept 16 years ago to be working in this space. And you look at the data and you go, okay, the study of the powders of this have the ability to upregulate tumor suppressor genes when directly injected into tumors. And let me make sure I explain that.
Say that again.
Yeah, exactly. we are the cure for cancer.
Right. The body. Naturally. We
are. We have tumor suppressor genes, P21, P27, P53, right? It's part of our genetic code that when a cell becomes abnormal or it becomes senescent.
You mean a free radical at that point?
From free radical damaging cells, when a cell dies, right? Because cells are created second by second, new cells, they go through their aging process and they die. Some of them don't die and break apart. They become senescent, which is where they become catabolic. They can become cancerous. Our tumor suppressor genes are what activate in those cells to cause those cells to die, to go through apoptosis, programmed cell death. They break apart. Mm-hmm. If the signaling on those doesn't work properly, those cells become cancerous. And as Christina does such a great job of explaining, because of how we are quantum, right? We are not just biological. We are quantum. And the abnormal cells start talking to healthy cells and say, be like me. That's how cancer proliferates. What was published in 2003 or 2005, one of the first studies I got to read, is that taking powdered clinoptilolite, and that's all they could work with because they don't have another mechanism. I'm supposed to be chatting with the researchers on this hopefully soon, but we're trying to get schedules together. they were taking a powdered clinoptilolate in water and then directly injecting it into tumors in rats and dogs with liver cancer tumors. And I think they were using some carcinoma tumors. And it was causing apoptosis in abnormal cells by the upregulation of tumor suppressor genes, P21 and P27, in only the cancer cells. It was causing them to die.
Holy shit.
Naturally. With no negative effect on healthy cells. You go, well, shit, that's a good deal. I would probably take that. And then you look at the antiviral properties, that this cage structure, this natural honeycomb, negatively charged cage structure that this crystal is, acts as a molecular sieve. That's the mechanism that it uses. It's like a magnet that traps all the bad shit inside of it and on the outside, because it has all these binding sites, and it's selective because it's a God particle.
So This is really interesting. You say all this. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because most people don't know that the tumor formation in your body, the capsule that's around the bad cells, is there to stop it from spreading. And what you're saying is that this crystal in powder form, injected right into the blood, goes directly after that encapsulated tumor, dissolves it, and doesn't even bother with anything else.
What they were doing in studies was, seeing how it would function in a controlled environment, because their problem was the only way to get it to cross that membrane was needle, right? And we know with a lot of cancers, if you puncture that membrane,
boom, it's open. Yeah.
All hell breaks loose.
It's like Ebola Zaire that's airborne. Yeah.
Yeah. And you go, well, shit, Pandora's box just opened up. And that's the problem with, breast cancer. But
that's exactly what they're doing in surgery. They're going in there and they're filleting that thing wide open. And then they wonder why they're having systemic issues after the procedure.
Yeah. And it creates a level of chaos. So to fast forward, what Cleanslate is that crystal through a very unique proprietary process that we frack. And fracking, people don't like the term now because of what's used in the oil industry.
Yeah,
right?
Politically. Yeah.
Fracking is one of the oldest processes for what would I say? Building and development, because back in our cave dwelling days, cavemen, when creating a cave, and this happens naturally as well, they build a fire in the cave, throw in lots of wood, get it super hot, and then they'd have the buckets of ice water outside, because they do it when it was really cold. So you get snow, really cold water.
Yep.
Heat up the caves, throw the water on the walls. The water would get inside all the cracks and crevices and then expand as it heats and it explodes. That's part of the process that we're doing to create the fragments of this amazing structure. So instead of it being a big honeycomb, we fracture it into much smaller fragments that then become bioavailable. They can permeate membranes. So the philosophy then, instead of having something that is big in a powdered form that would stay in your gut when ingested, because kaopectate is clinoptilolate. It's in its powdered form. That's why it's an antidiarrheal, because it'll hold water.
Huh.
What we've done is just make it nano and micron sized, really, really small, that are able to permeate different membranes, whether it's your mucosal membranes, your sublingual membranes, your GI membranes, get into your bloodstream, work into joints, through tissue, into tissue, cross some of those membranes, and do what it naturally does, which is grab onto all the bad stuff and then allow the body to start regulating the way it wants to. That's the simple aspect of all it's doing is systemically, from head to toes, removing all the bad shit that causes all the problems. And if you do that truly systemically, a lot of people like to say cellularly, right? That we can get back to what we are, which is basically a big starburst.
Right.
Because we are just this massive bundle of energy, but we've been inhibited, which leads to pineal function. But you look at every aspect of function. We are inhibited by the metals and environmental toxins, organ function, joint function, cognitive function, CNS function, pick one, like we were touching on with mercury.
So let me ask you this then. So to simplify this, just to keep it really high level, this is going to go after the bad stuff, give it an exit route, so your body can then optimize itself and do what it was designed to do. Now, when it gets to the product itself in the bottle, now it says take 10 drops. It's a small little bottle. How frequently, how often, how many bottles do you need? That's what people are going to ask. Is there a recommendation on there? What have you seen that's too much? What have you seen that's not effective enough?
So titration is really important. So if we talk about the ideal time frame to be using this, it's honestly womb to tomb, which we've hit on. We're not provided that luxury. We have root babies now, and we've had women have absolutely amazing pregnancies and super healthy babies, and that babies, mom is using it through pregnancy and now while breastfeeding, and babies are getting their drop, on a daily basis, and without some of the issues that we talked about being put in the body. Mm-hmm. And the results that they're getting, we had our first root baby was in Norway. And when he was born, insanely healthy, but at 1 month when he went in to go get his checkup and all the other stuff that we were saying you don't want to put in hasn't been done in this kid. The pediatrician, upon doing the first checkup, was like, okay, this kid's 1 month old and he's looking around the room. He's scanning everything. He's alert. He's like, you typically don't see that until 6 months or a year. And this kid's aware. They're going, this is different. I'm like, something's a little bit different. So ideally womb to tomb. And people go, well, why to tomb? Because as we hit on, every second you're breathing, everything you're drinking, everything you're eating, continually on a daily basis adds to our exposure. Right. So we're never going to be in a clean environment. But if you've ever been here and you were conceived and you were born, and every day up to the point we are now, you've been exposed. So you've got to get all this stuff out. And that is not something that you can do quickly. There is no 1 week cleanse. There's no juice cleanse. There's no 90-day detox challenge that you can do that will do this effectively. And if you do something that quick, honestly, you can kill someone.
Yeah, I can see that.
If you really do it well, you can kill someone or create major chaos, which is why with all of these weight loss programs that people are going through, you over time start to see symptomology in many people of autoimmune issues, of joint problems, of different health issues. I had one friend a few years ago, she was actually a spokesperson for a company. She lost like 47 inches total and just fat from all over. And within a month of that happening, she was diagnosed with MS. And you go, she called me. She's like, I got a problem. I can't tell anyone this. I need your help. I'm like, okay, what happened? She's like, well, I just went to my doctor because I got all these joint issues. I've got all this stuff that's come up in the last month. And my doctor says I have MS. I'm like, no, you don't have MS. It's like, you have to understand what fat is. Fat's a storage medium for energy, but it's also a storage medium for toxins and chemicals.
Yeah, absolutely.
You burn off the fat. All of those toxins are released back into your bloodstream. They have to be sequestered again. They're going to end up in organs. They're going to end up in your brain. They're going to end up in your central nervous system. They're going to end up back in fat, which is why statistically, when you look at the data on fat loss in people, they are going to add back on anywhere from 12 to 105% of what they lost, usually within 12 to 18 months. Data supports it. It's because all of that shit that left the fat, as the fat cells shrunk from improving your metabolism or whatever you do, goes back, or it's going to cause problems in other areas. Because
so that's a survival mechanism then? Is that what you're saying?
What's that?
So it's a natural, well, I don't want to say natural, that's a misconstrued way of understanding or using that word. but your body is in survival mechanism, so it puts it back so you don't die.
Exactly, because if those toxins continually circulate or sequestered, let's say they get sequestered in your liver or sequestered in your kidneys, which happens a lot. What happens if you overload a filter in your car and you continually do it, you don't replace it, you don't maintain your car? What happens to your car?
Either it burns off or the car breaks down.
It breaks down.
Yeah.
Right?
And if it burns off, there's nothing there, then you don't even have a filter to begin with, and then you're done. Vicious cycle, vicious loop.
We're the same thing. If you don't take care of your filters, you don't get to exist very long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being able to address those issues, and what this does is it gives you the ability to control the process, because each of us is a clinical trial of one, right?
Right.
We all suffer from the same condition. Doesn't matter what color we are, where we come from. We all suffer from the same condition. We're all human. As humans, there's one absolute. We're all polluted, which we hit on. And the process of detoxification and systemic detoxification is something that has to be done slowly. It has to be done passively, right? Because you can't put too much pressure on the body, because it'll go into chaos mode.
Right. Agreed.
Herx reactions, brain fog, all the bad stuff that people don't want to deal with. And if you've ever done another cleanse, that shitty feeling that you get during it, that's your wake-up call. You don't want that. So you can control your process. So while the bottle says 10 drops twice a day, that's really the therapeutic, really knock it out dosage that we have found to be really insanely beneficial for everyone. We found, because of what Cleanslate is now and how strong it is, we tell everybody to start with 1 drop, 1 in the morning, 1 at night, and then titrate up.
I do 10.
Yeah, and because you do more work, right? You've done more work to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
The average human, we've become so polluted that you can't do that. And if you want the analogy, it's like watching a show of hoarders, right? And you have this psychological issue in the individual, that if you go into their house or you go into their yard and say, okay, this thing's a shithole, we're just starting to rip out all of this stuff, you have a couple things that'll happen. They'll have a psychotic break because they can't handle doing that quickly. You create chaos and you can't get it all out. So things start getting moved around. Things will fall over. You just create chaos. You don't want that happening in your body, right? So you have to start slow. You incrementally make those changes, but the same analogy applies when you start slow and you do it systemically. If you take that individual and you say, hey, look, you got toilets, couple refrigerators, car parts, and a sink sitting in your front yard. I don't think you need those anymore. Can we remove those? And then we'll talk about the rest. And you start to remove some of the bad stuff slowly. It starts to make a big difference in how things look and how things work.
Right.
As you get started. And then as you see those changes, then you start to build upon them. But you do it slowly and you control the process. And if you do that, and it's not to say that you don't see phenomenal changes happen really quickly, but you can control it.
Well,
and
let me ask you this.
You layer it.
So we know we're polluted. Should someone go get a blood test? And what blood test should they ask from their doctor? So versus like a typical, CBC test, what specific?
They can do heavy metal testing in blood, but the big thing to understand with blood tests, and good doctors will tell you this, blood's a transportation medium.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So if you're exposed to metals, which we all are on a daily basis, I'll use arsenic as an example, right? So if you eat a lot of rice, you have and we can look at the entire Asian population, Koreans, Filipinos, Chinese, Japanese, Malaysians, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong. We can go down the list, right? Rice is a staple in their environment, and it's a food staple, right?
Yep.
rice is a filter for arsenic naturally. So white rice and brown rice are loaded with arsenic. So if you go over to some of the lesser developed countries in and throughout Southeast Asia, you will see a lot of symptomology in kids, teenagers, and adults of systemic arsenic toxicity. So if you test someone's blood, and the hard part with arsenic is it's metabolized so quickly, it doesn't stay in your bloodstream. It's sequestered really quickly. The same thing goes for mercury and aluminum and lead and cadmium and aluminum. I said aluminum, but the other metal, some of the other heavy metals, if they circulate through your system, they're going to cause more damage. So your body sequesters them really quickly because it recognizes that, oh, I got to get this stuff out. And so if you're doing a blood test and you find metals, you know that you're acutely exposed, at that point. So blood is not really a good measurement. And the hard part is I worked with Dr. Wolfgang Wall. Wolfgang's over I think he's in Munich. And he's probably the top guy in the world when it comes to analytical testing for heavy metals and depleted uranium. And he created his device because of DU, which is a whole other show in its own right. The depleted uranium issue, he created an MRI that will basically identify mercury, metals, DU in your body. The equipment costs like $5 million. He's got two of them. One of them's on a KC-137 because he goes over to Saudi, Kuwait, the UAE, and Dubai to do testing over there on some of the royals and their families because of their exposure to mercury and DU. Thank you to our government in using depleted uranium rounds in the Gulf War, which was one of the most heinous things that could ever be done. We nuked an entire region and no one had a clue because we did it one round at a time. And if you have a good stomach and you want to see atrocities, look up images and depleted uranium. And it's horrible. If you can't stand pedophilia, which we should never look at images of pedophilia either, but if you want to see the other side of what that group does and what they've done, it will turn your stomach, and you probably won't be able to look at more than 2 or 3 images on what's happening to people over there and how horrific this stuff is. But he created a measurement to identify it so they can address it. The only way I've really found effective, some people talk about hair analysis, which you can see I have plenty of to do my analysis. You and I are a little bit different in our perspectives. When we look at analysis, there's no real methods that we have to do analysis of what we're exposed to other than tissue biopsies. And most people are reluctant to do tissue biopsies while breathing, right? Because you're like, okay, I need to look at what's in my brain. I need to look at what's in my skin, my liver, my kidneys. You're not needle biopsying me for any of those. That's out. So the only way you can really do it is looking at excretion, right? So urine analysis is really the best way. But what a lot of practitioners have done over years that are doing chelation therapy is they like to do a provoked baseline, which means they'll use like DMPS or DMSA, which are highly toxic and caustic mechanisms, not very effective, create more risk than benefit because it's like shaking up a snow globe, right? You have your body with how it's functioning, and that snow globe, well, it's kind of like this, right? That we have this specific environment for how that sand is settled in our body. And what these chelators, the old school philosophy does for chelation is shake it up, and then we'll try to get a little bit out to see what's coming out. And if you do that, you can get a little bit out, but it's like we were going over with fat. If you shake up everything, it's going to get sequestered. It's going to create chaos. Yeah. So you don't want to do that. You can hurt people. So the key is to look at a baseline, unprovoked, of what people are doing naturally, what's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we love to do is have them use Cleanslate, usually for a week. Start with a couple drops, get up to 10 drops twice a day. And then usually around the 7th day, we'll do another test and look at what they're excreting at that point. That's going to give us a snapshot of what's coming out at that point. Because if we really wanted hardcore analysis, we would get that baseline, and then we'd have someone start on Cleanslate, and we would test them every day for the next couple of years.
All right. So let me ask you this. I have to jump into this because this is where I'm going to get granular with this conversation. So for parents or people who have ADHD, what are the testimonials coming back about Cleanslate?
That's going to pull the conversation to zero in too, because of the mechanisms. But here, we'll make it really simple, because people will ask the question about, well, you're talking about ADHD, ADD, Asperger's, Alzheimer's, autism, but what about chronic fatigue? What about fibromyalgia? What about all the way up to dementia, Alzheimer's, and such, right?
Sure.
No cause, no symptoms.
Wait, hold on. Time out. Are you telling me that this stuff can help people with Alzheimer's and dementia as well?
Well, you want to go down that road real quick?
Yep.
Okay. So you familiar with CTE, right?
Yes.
So many people have become accustomed or knowledgeable of CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Mm-hmm.
Allegedly. Did you know there's 2 forms of CTE?
No.
This is where research gets to come in. So the real primary form of CTE is called chronic toxic encephalopathy. And what it's caused from, this is published, proven, PubMed research this, go to town on it so you can see I'm not an idiot. I might not be sane because you can tell by my hair, but you can do your own research on this, because I had to about 10 years ago. And when the CTE studies and the conversations with the NFL came out, they're like, oh, well, this is what tau is. And it's the tau that builds up in the brain that causes the neurological damage and memory loss. Alzheimer's and dementia have the same tau buildup. So for me, it was really easy to look at the correlation and go, okay, just like you have injuries in joints, with a concussion, you shake the brain a little bit in its fluid that causes disruptions in specific areas wherever the shaking took place, which increases ionic activity in the brain in that specific area.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens in the concussion? If you have it in a kid, you have it in a teenager or a 20-year-old, that ionic activity acts like a magnet. Now, aluminum, mercury, and lead are all neurotoxins. They love brain tissue. So they're already there from the time we're conceived. When we're born, they're in our brain. We're exposed to them on a daily basis. So you have an increase in ionic activity from an event. That acts like a magnet for those metals. So they're drawn to that area. They congregate earlier on than taking 50, 60, 70 years to congregate in an area. They create plaque, that amyloid plaque, the tau, earlier on than traditionally at 50, 60, 70, 80 years of being exposed to metals when it happens. That's the issue.
So that's where all the plaque buildup in the hardening of the brain tissue causing the, wow.
But that same process happens in your freaking arteries.
Right.
So you go, wait a minute.
Holy shit. You don't know what you just did. You don't know what you just did. So Dr. Tom Cowan was on the show and he was talking and he has The Heart and the Cosmic Heart. I forget the name of the book off the top of my head. I read half of it, but what causes heart attacks? What you just said on how all of that combined with Alzheimer's, dementia, and what happens in the arteries with the calcification of the hardware, meaning the organs, the vessels. You just proved what he said right.
Yeah. Well, and we'll take one extra step on that because we solved the brain issue. Heavy metals are highly inflammatory.
Yeah.
If they're circulating through your system, they're inflammatory. They damage the endothelial lining of your arteries. They create damage, which then has to be healed. The ionic activity that happens there gets blocked by those metals. It creates plaque. But the reduction in endothelial function also leads to a reduction in nitric oxide production. So this doesn't happen anymore, right? So as we were talking about before, and you guys you and the Much Better Beautiful half did the overview on the detox triangle, right?
Yep.
Hearing, vision, and erectile function, because it's the smallest parts of the body, the smallest arteries that get damaged first.
Right.
But here's the crazy part with all that. We are innately made to regenerate and heal. It's what we do. You cut your finger and heal.
So let me jump in on that. So with the calcification of the pineal gland, which is the trigger that tells your body to heal, how to heal, where to heal, and with Cleanslate decalcifying, with everything you just talked about, wow.
So the pineal gland is the light center of the brain.
Right.
Right. So it is the spiritual center, which is why there was such a focus in turning it off, because the last thing that those that want to control the greater population desire is for the population to become enlightened or illuminated. And I don't know if we'll get into that topic. I mean, the illumination aspect is what everything is built on. And there's a much smaller population of people that don't want or want to keep that understanding from the masses. Because if the masses became knowledgeable of what we are truly capable of doing, humanity goes a completely different direction than what we're going currently. And we go supernova.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've seen that clinically. I'll send you the studies that Dr. Stefan Rao did looking at heart rate variability analysis using Cleanslate and Zer0-InOne in 45 minutes. I watched someone's chakras go nuclear. I mean, she went starburst. It's insane. So when you look at these steps, you go, okay, what you're saying is if you do this one thing, everything else works better. And I'm answering yes, because it's all the same etiology. It's all the same problem. It's just where that it lies.
Right.
It's fluoride in your pineal gland. It's mercury, lead, aluminum in your brain. It's cadmium, arsenic, lead, aluminum, cesium, strontium, gadolinium. We can get into that conversation because of our medical backgrounds and dye contrast MRIs and how bad they are. And please, somebody get me in touch with Chuck Norris so we can help Christy Brinkley. But you get into all of these different issues that we talk about. Pick a health condition. And I'll send you, so we can post this in some of the comments. Dr. Dori Narbo, she's one of the leading stem cell researchers out there, and a compatriot of ours, and an ambassador and a good friend. We had a phenomenal stem cell conversation because stem cells are a really popular conversation. And, we understand that stem cells can become any type of cell in the body.
Right.
That's a little bit of Pandora's box, though. And in my initial conversation with her, we've been working together for a couple of years now, and Christina's worked with her for many years. She was telling me that with autistic kids, they won't do stem cell therapy on autistic kids because they're loaded with mercury. And you can't put healthy stem cells into a toxic environment because those stem cells will become abnormal because of the toxic environment. And you sure as hell don't want abnormal cells that replicate really quickly.
Wow. Holy shit.
I laughed at her. I'm like, because she oversees the primary clinic in Panama and the biggest stem cell clinic in Texas.
So let me stop right there for a minute, because this is important. This is really important. So we know that stem cells is going to magnify as well as replicate toxic cells. So we know now. You probably watched what Del Bigtree just did with ICANN, so the Informed Consent Action Network. Their lawsuit just flipped the wording in the ruling on vaccines and autism. Now, this is published on that website, saying that now inoculative drug therapy, there is no proof. There are no studies claiming that it does not do that.
Yeah. And and this is where I had fun with Dory, because I'm like, Dory, so you're telling me that the youngest group is loaded with mercury, and you can't do stem cell injections on them because they're loaded with mercury. She's like, yes. I'm like, great. So you have Mel Gibson, all of these celebrities paying $25,000 to $50,000 to go do stem cell IVs for you guys, with you guys down in Panama. And you have people that are doing stem cell injections. So the population that you're injecting into, they're loaded with mercury and environmental toxins as well. But you're doing it on them because they're older. And she's like, oh, shit. I'm like, look up the data. So she did a compendium for me to start with, because she's a research freak. I got 235 pages of data on different health conditions and how heavy metals tie to them: autism, Alzheimer's, cancer, Parkinson's, dementia, high cholesterol, hypertension, dyslipidemia, cardiovascular disease, the big five. There's one population study that was done in the UK a couple years ago on 350,000 people. What the data showed: diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, hypertension, heart problems, dyslipidemia, high cholesterol, all caused by heavy metal toxicity. Period. Case closed. Yeah. No more questions, please. Done. So, no cause, no symptoms. Pick one. I'll give you the same answer. The best part is if you systemically remove those slowly, safely, passively, you win.
You win. Yeah.
And this is the key. This is the key for everybody. And if you want to get me on a passion project and you want me to use language that some people might find offensive, one thing that pisses me off to no end with Del Bigtree and all of these people, and I love what they're doing, but they're pissing up the wrong tree. Instead of pissing everybody off and talking about the problem, why don't you just focus on the freaking solution? Well, because why don't we just clean up every freaking person and say, fuck it. We know what the problem is, but you know what? We're done arguing.
Yeah.
We're going to put our focus on good, because what we know spiritually and what we know energetically, if you continually focus on the negative, you continually give power to the negative. They're feeding the beast by putting their energy into it.
They don't realize that there is no difference between the physical and the spiritual at this point.
It's all metaphysical. It's freaking quantum.
Yeah.
And this is the key. We'll bring it right back. We're using nature's most powerful crystal to unlock our spiritual center and every other part of the body. And you go, wait a minute. That's what everybody's talking about right now. Yeah.
Yeah. As well as how fast time is going by right now because the earth is spinning faster.
Yeah. Well, and I had a friend text me on Friday. She's like, did you see this new data on the electromagnetic field of the earth? It went up like 6,000%.
Yeah.
How's this affecting you? She's like, I don't know what to deal with this. I don't know how to handle it. I'm like, just be like Fonzie. Just be cool. It means the earth is becoming more resonant. We're becoming more resonant. And the more connected you are to it, the more vibrant you're going to become. And she's like, and I was like, that's why all the bad shit is going on too, because those that are negative are going, shit, we can't deal with this anymore.
Right.
But that's another episode too.
I know. Let me jump backwards to the ADHD. We talked about Zer0-InOne. Now, no one else has tried this in my household besides me. You and I have communicated before this recording, and I'm going to refer to you. How soon did I call you before I said, what the hell's going on?
What was it? A couple hours or a day?
I think it was like a day, right?
It was a day.
Stuff like that.
Yep.
So, and the only way I can explain it is that if you take a Red Bull, if you take some kind of energy drink and you get that massive vasodilation, that heart pump, but you feel the sense of alertness, right? Stop there. You take Zer0-In, you get all the alertness and more with this heightened sensitivity and awareness without any of the vasodilation, the heart, chest cramping, and all the boom, 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 boom effect on top of it. You just go about your day. And on top of it, now I've experimented a little bit. So one of the days I took just one, other days I've took two. You don't need two. Technically speaking, you don't need two. Two, for me, I was like, whew, I was flying. I was definitely doing great. But at the same time, when you need to come down, and I'm just going to use that for general terms, but when you're about to go to bed and you're unwinding, you go to bed and you sleep like a rock. It is unbelievable. Not going to finish yet. Now, when you combine Zer0-In on top of Cleanslate, it's not even magic. It's stardust magic.
I'll take your analogy and I'll raise you one.
Sure.
And I've never done this because of being an athlete in college and prior in my raising. I'd say at least 5 or 6, maybe seven instances. So it's not a one-time deal, and I've never done this. But what you're talking about with Red Bull, there's a substance that's even more powerful than Red Bull that people understand, and hopefully many people haven't done it, but those that have done it can equate. And it's the one substance that will not only kill you because your heart can explode, you can lose your house because many people have, and it ramps up dopamine like nothing else, and that's cocaine.
Right.
And I've had cokeheads come back to me and go, "This is better than Coke," and it's because of what you hit on. And it goes back to mechanism and process. And this is the beautiful part of better living through biochemistry and proper formulation. Because if you have a biotech super genius and a pegacorn, like I have with Christina, you can do things a little bit differently than others, right? And she has her background, which you went over. I mean, Harvard, nanotechnology, bioscience engineering, Cornell, and pharmaceutical management and nutritional counseling. You know, Alexion, Biogen, IDEC, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, UCB, a couple others, adjunct professor at Hopkins. You go, that's one person. But because of our backgrounds, we have a little different perspective. And taking the approach of biotech science into the nutraceutical space, that you can create outcomes that are different. Mm-hmm. And this is where the collaborative aspect, and I'll do my shameless product placement. You take Zer0-In and Cleanslate. It's not one or the other. It's both and it's synergy. Because if you remove the bad stuff, and this is the key of why these work so well together, dopamine and serotonin are the two most powerful neurotransmitters we produce. And we know that they go to the brain, but it's where they're produced that's crucial. 95% of those neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. Glyphosate, mercury, metals, what do? They destroy the microbiome of the gut. Mm-hmm. But here's the worst part. They shut off the production of dopamine and serotonin. But even worse than that, we know what cortisol is, right? The stress hormone.
Stress hormone, yeah.
Cortisol shuts off dopamine and serotonin production. So the two neurotransmitters that have the ability to overpower the feeling of stress and overwhelm and all of the issues that come from stress and such, the stress hormone shuts off our ability to overpower it with dopamine and serotonin. Cleanslate removes a bunch of the junk to allow that process to start taking place. Zer0-In feeds your gut and helps the microbiome regenerate because of the ingredient profile. But it feeds your gut this specific recipe that allows it to produce dopamine and serotonin on demand as it needs. So like you hit on, that during the day, you'll have more focus and mental clarity because during the day, your brain wants more dopamine and it wants a little serotonin. So you feel good, you feel happy, you're relaxed, your mood is great, but you're alert, you're focused, and you just feel freaking amazing.
Yep.
That's why cocaine's so popular, because it ramps up dopamine so quickly that you go, I can conquer the freaking world. The problem with cocaine is that it creates so much dopamine, it overpowers the pathways, and then throws everything for a freaking loop. It's highly addictive. It's made with freaking diesel fuel, so it'll really jack up your system, causes heart attacks. You know, the addiction will cost you your house. It's really expensive. No need to play with it. What makes Zer0-In so special is it's an adaptogen. So during the day, your body is controlling the entire process. And one of the unique aspects is the anhydrous caffeine that we use. Anhydrous caffeine, we know caffeine is unique because it's a stimulant. It's also a catalyst. It's a stimulant for chemical reactions, which is how we use it. But the unique part of this anhydrous caffeine that you'll see on the label is it's also a dopamine buffer. So instead of spiking, it allows your body to produce the dopamine it wants to get up to the perfect level that it desires. And then you plateau, and it's like you're taking a transatlantic flight.
Yeah, you're just cruising.
Because you're just cruising. And then when it's time to land, you don't crash. You just come down.
Yeah, you just land. You just land, you go to bed, you wake up, and that's it. You're done.
And when you're ready to rest, here's the crazy part with an adaptogen. Your body knows when it's time to rest, oh, I need more serotonin. So it shifts to producing more serotonin than melatonin. Melatonin. I'm getting ahead of myself. Serotonin and dopamine, you get a shift. But why is serotonin important? Because serotonin goes to the pineal gland, which Cleanslate decalcifies. And in the pineal gland converts serotonin to melatonin, lights out. And then when you're ready to get up, it shifts to producing more dopamine, and you're alert and you're awake.
Yeah.
It's the first thing I've ever seen that you can take during the day, and you're focused, you're alert, you feel amazing. But at the same time, you take the same capsule at night, it's going to put you in a coma. And I've taken a lot of supplements ever since I was 8 years old. It is the most unique, most fun supplement I've ever taken. And we get into the biohacking conversation, right? And as an athlete and as someone that loves performance, like you mentioned, it's like you only need one. Might be true, but I'll tell you, if you're an athlete or you want to perform better or you want to go out and have fun, now you have dopamine and serotonin on demand. But if you're an athlete, and Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry proved this back in the 80s, and Charlie Murphy and Rick James did a phenomenal analogy on this. Cocaine's a hell of a drug. But if you can remove the cocaine and you say, you know what? Dopamine on demand is freaking amazing, especially if you can dictate how much you want. If you take like 2 capsules before a workout or before you compete, you will compete at a level and perform at a level of which it is unfamiliar. And this stuff is so strong. I had one of the NFL offensive coordinators that lives here close to me. It's friend of the family. His kid goes to school with my kid, and his son brought some capsules home and a bottle of Cleanslate for him. He called me after a couple of days. He's like, dude, we need to talk. He's like, what in the hell is this stuff? Because I took 1 capsule, it's kind of like you said. He's like, I get a lot of stuff given to me to try because of what I do. He said, this shit works. Not only does it works well. He said, and it works so well that I need to make sure that it's banned substance free, because if it is, I'm taking it to my quarterback.
Well, let me jump in on this real quick. So, everyone knows I'm really responsible with this stuff. Try it, use it, okay? But don't take 10, right? Don't just wean yourself into what you're going to take naturally.
More is not better.
Yeah, more is not better here, because I haven't taken more than 2, and I'm telling everyone I am a 6'4", 210-pound man, and I'm all muscle. Okay. And at 2, and now I took one in the morning and I took the second one around like the 3:00 coffee time, right? Just to do it. I didn't need it. And I was like, whew, and there was no heart pumping else going on. But I was like, wow.
Yep.
It was just.
And for me, everybody gets to figure out their biochemistry and what works best for them. What I have found works best for me is when I get up, like I did, this morning, because I knew we were going to be hanging out and I had a bunch of stuff to get done because it's Monday. And I'll take 2 in the morning and I'm good for 12 hours because of that, prolonged cruise, right? Instead of spiking, it just pushes that process out further. I'm good for 10 to 12 hours and I'm amazing. And you don't calm down. The first time I got these a couple of years ago, because it took 3 years to develop the formula, and then we tested it for another 2 years before we put it on the market, and didn't kill anybody. And that's good market analysis.
Yeah, thankfully.
And the first test I did, I took 1 capsule in the morning. I was like, I didn't feel anything. And my colleague called me. He's like, take 2, but don't do it after noon. I'm like, okay. So 12:00 in the afternoon or noon on a Saturday, I was like, oh, I got to try 2 of these. So I popped 2 of them, empty stomach, which is ideal. And if one hits you like too much, then take it with food, and then it'll buffer it a little bit. Yeah. But ideally, take it without food. I took 2 the first time, and I cleaned the office. I did all my bookkeeping. I solved about every problem that I had for, product design, business development ideas. At 2:00 in the morning, I was writing on all of my windows in my office and realized I needed to go to bed. And I went home and crashed and woke up the next morning, felt amazing. I was like, oh, that's an experience.
Yeah.
And it's the fun part of everybody being a clinical study of one. But this is one thing that I'll say it. You can use recreationally just to feel amazing. You can use it athletically. You can use it as an executive. You can use it like my daughter. She's 15. She gets major, performance anxiety and just has the anxiety of every teenage girl of not wanting to go to school because people are going to look at her. She'll take 1 in the morning and calm. And so when you look at, like you were talking about, ADHD and ADD, but also anxiety, depression, those issues. And on the box, it says you got to be careful of using this with other medical conditions like hypertension, and especially the anxiety and psych disorders, because usually they're all medicated. And if you use Cleanslate and Zer0-In and you're medicated, and it doesn't matter if you're on high blood pressure medications, cholesterol medications, any drugs, a healthy system doesn't need them. So you're going to have to titrate down and eventually probably eliminate the use of them because you're going to be healthy.
Yeah.
And that's the important part of just figuring out how to play with your biochemistry and how to make you the best you possible. That's where it becomes fun.
That really is going to be a challenge for some. I can see that because when they go back to their primary care physician and they're asking for guidance, they're not going to know what to do. So this type of, hey, be aware, be cognizant of, is the right approach to do that. And again, you need to check yourself first. Just like after you have a meal, how do you feel? Do you feel heavy and sluggish, or do you feel light? That's going to give you a nice indicator of whether or not that food's good for you or not.
When you start to look at lab data, right? When you talk about clinical studies, I'm not big on clinical studies because we're a clinical trial of one. Now, granted, I've got one of the top functional med docs in the country that's starting a study here at the end of the month on 12 patients that we're going to study down in Florida. So down in your neck of the woods. He's nice. At the University of Miami. He's a big deal.
Oh, you're going to come visit me then?
So I'll be down there.
Yeah.
And he's like, what should we test? What do we want to test for heavy metals? I'm like, no, I want C-reactive protein. I want CBCs, Chem7s. I want liver enzymes. I want A1Cs. I want PSA, cholesterol, red cell count, all of it, because you see all of it improve. I want basal metabolic rate, body fat percentage. because a healthy body reconstructs. It's what we're made to do, but the body dictates the process. Like for one woman, and her testimonial is one of the case studies that we had a testimonial on the YouTube channel. She's like, I wanted to use Cleanslate because I had really bad psoriasis and I saw what happened to Mark. She's like, I didn't think it would take care of my depression and anxiety. She's, I never thought of it, but
because it regulated her dopamine or serotonin levels.
It removed the cause of it. She was thinking she wanted her psoriasis to go away, never imagining that her mental health would improve. But her body knows most important thing for me is mental health. So that's where it focused initially.
Clayton, as we wrap this up a little bit, because I want to leave some for episode 2, 3, and 4 at this point. You're obviously an educated guy and you use words and language and you've proved that you know what you're talking about. How do you educate yourself? What are you listening to? What peer review studies? What podcasts?
You know, the first thing I do to get information and become more knowledgeable is listen to your podcasts. But everyone here is good at that already.
Thank you.
No, but like I said, it's just a compilation of experiences. And I don't, people say, what books are you reading? I really don't read books. I read literature. But the one thing that I'll say is it's life experience, but life experience comes from so many different things, right? And especially as you clean stuff up and as things start to work better, it's like you talked about with NZT, right? With the movie Limitless, is when you turn that process on, everything becomes easier, right? Dopamine actually helps you retain information. So from a studying standpoint for your kids, but also for us in general, dopamine not only helps you stay alert and stay focused, but it helps you retain the information. So for me, I pick, or I'll ask myself the internal questions, or I'll have someone ask me a question, or I'll see something going on in the environment or in the news or, a topic, and I'll just dive into it. But I've taught myself to rethink, as we hit on initially, the process, right? Of don't believe what you hear, but look at the different perspective. You hear someone talking about cancer and they go, okay, what's the etiology of cancer? Well, let's look at environmental toxins and cancer. Or then because of what we do with Cleanslate, someone will, it's like, okay, well, what about this specific condition? What about Down syndrome, right? And you go, okay, well, let me get on PubMed and let's look up Down syndrome and mercury to see if there's any correlating factors, or Down syndrome and heavy metals. And I had never done this up until a couple months ago. And you know what I found? Freaking mercury in the womb is what causes the DNA damage that causes Down syndrome, which is why women, as they age, have a higher risk of having a Downs baby, because their continual exposure over time leads to higher levels of mercury concentration in their body. And the difference between men and women is this: boys and men, mercury loves the brain and central nervous system. But in women, it loves the endocrine and reproductive systems. It loves your thyroid and it loves your ovaries. So you're all jacked up, you're hormonal because you're toxic, and your ovaries are loaded with metals, which is where the eggs are coming from. And when you have an egg fertilized, it just dumps on them and you don't know how it's going to get damaged. Sometimes there's enough metals and toxins in that environment that it just kills the fetus, right? Miscarriage rates are off the freaking charts. But if you're able to carry, sometimes you'll have damage to specific DNA that leads to, Downs, or it could lead to other personality traits. Now, there are some things that are genetic that we get from our parents, but a lot of the damage is actually familial. There's a difference between genetic and familial. Familial is environmental. Genetic is what, we put in as far as our genes, but we can get into the epigenetics conversation and all of that. So it's a matter of having the interest of diving into stuff. So I can't say that there's one source. I try to wash myself in everything and devour as much info as I can, because for me, this is fun, right?
Yeah.
It's of interest. And I think that's the intriguing part for me, is that, I've had my shoulder tapped twice in my life when God just gives you that little tap. The first time was when this concept was put in front of me 16 years ago, and God just goes, follow it. That's your thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second time was when John Sally introduced me to Christina, and I heard her voice, and God was like, that's her. You serve her. Go. And you know what you're supposed to do already. Do it with her. And that's where we are. And I think that's the most fun we can have, like you have with your beautiful better half, of when you find your match, your soulmate, whatever, as a guy, when you find the one you're supposed to serve, it's limitless.
Yeah.
Right. That's the cool part. So I can't say that listen to this guy, listen to that girl, do this, do that. As was once said by Dave Chappelle, just bathe yourself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka. Just
all right.
Get info from everywhere and then learn.
Final. You can leave the audience with whatever you'd like to. What would you like to tell them?
Do what you did. Try Cleanslate, zero in. Don't take my word. Don't take your word. If you're here, if you listen to Scott, this is what, 65 episodes or so that you've done?
This will be probably somewhere like 75 plus in that range. Yeah.
So if you're here, you've done this 75 or so times. You're probably one that puts more thought into things than most. And you're probably one that has a desire to perform better than most. This is one thing, or these are two things you've never done before. And this is a level of function and performance that you've never experienced before. And I'll challenge you. Call me on it. Call me on bullshit. Because if the shit don't work, I'll give you your money back. But here's what I'll guarantee you. You won't send it back. Because some things are absolute. Like what Cleanslate does, our metabolism, if we're taking normal nutritional supplements, our metabolism dictates, and our ability to absorb nutrients dictates whether or not those things will work.
Yeah.
Cleanslate's different. It's basically a rare earth magnet. You can't change what it does. It just binds toxins. So
would it be fair to say this? So you and I talked about this a little bit, and a friend turned me on to this, but the supplementation market, the natural path, homeopath supplementation market is driven by the pharmacological market, because everyone's like, no, I don't want that stuff because they have a bad.
I want to treat my symptoms in a different way.
Right. So
they don't want to address the etiology.
Exactly.
It's like, look, you want to save money? Why don't you just get the shit out of your body, let everything else take place?
So versus drowning yourself with all the vitamins and minerals you can just take Cleanslate and at that point have a regular, good old-fashioned clean diet versus in nourishing your body God's way. Is that too far from the truth?
I don't take many supplements. I eat a lot of Himalayan sea salt. Mm-hmm. Cleanslate's got trace minerals added to it. I use my Zer0-InOne. I will supplement with colostrum from time to time. But most of that is just diet. And here's the crazy part. Sugar addiction, gone.
Yeah. Real and gone.
Here's the thing. It's the new year. Right. So people have their resolutions. How about you try things different this year? You want to lose weight? That's easy. That's negative inflammation. We remove the cause of it. Watch the inches and the weight come off naturally without changing your lifestyle, without changing your diet, without having to go to the gym, without having to go for a walk. Just watch what happens when you start to flush stuff out. But as you start to change your system, your choices for foods will change. The cravings flip. Instead of wanting bad shit, instead of wanting processed stuff and chemicals, your body will start to crave good stuff because it's resetting. It's not something that you have to elect to do. It's something that is innate in us when we're not programmed to do the opposite. Get the bad shit out. Let the good things happen. And if you...
That's a statement of the century right there.
Yeah. It's not hard. Just clean up the mess. I mean, Trump wanted to drain the swamp, and we saw what happens when he started that process. What happens when you drain your swamp? Because all we are is a beautiful cesspool. You got to clean the swamp.
Yeah, no doubt. So if you are interested in trying Cleanslate and Zer0-InOne, go to therootbrands.com/healthcare360. You'll see create brand new Root brand account. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. You'll see a referral code. Put in healthcare360. After you entered in all your information, hit register. Order there, you're good to go. And that's it. Voila. The rest is history. And you'll feel better. And I would love to know, give us some emails back. Give us some feedback on the YouTube comment link, etc., so we can find and just hear the stories. I would love to hear the stories.
And if you want more info, and once we have this, we can put our YouTube channel in there. I think we've got 60, 70, 80 hours of content. Every week, I do an interview with Dory that she'll pick a subject. She researches it for a week, and then she doesn't tell me until we do it. But there's over 50 hours, over 52 separate interviews on all different kinds of subjects, from mercury toxicity to vitamin. We just did a phenomenal vitamin D interview last week. We've got some testimonials from case studies, diabetes conversations that'll blow you away because it's a different perspective on diabetes than you've probably ever heard. Same thing for cardiovascular disease and such. Diabetes is a fun one, because it's so simple. And I'll send you the data.
Type 1 and type 2, or just type 2?
Type 1, type 2, and type 3 now, because now they're calling Alzheimer's and dementia type 3 diabetes. Almost like there's a correlation.
That's interesting.
Same etiology. Who knew?
Yeah.
And this is the managed care philosophy, right? If you and the World Health Organization, before they were completely nasty, published this in 1974, that about 85 to 90% of all chronic degenerative diseases were caused by environmental toxins. And pharma's really smart, because what they did is they're like, great, if we know the etiology and we never address the etiology and we continue to put in more toxic chemicals that continually burden the system while we're treating one symptom for a diagnosis, the way that this process works, over time, you're going to create other symptoms, which can lead to an additional diagnosis, which leads to other medication or other therapies.
That's called wire pursing. They're wire pursing themselves right into your bank account, and then you die.
Yep. And then you owe them money when you die. Right.
I know. And then they try next of kin. It is nasty. My gosh. So cool, man. Hey, you've been a blast. I'm probably going to text you right after we're done and say, okay, schedule for a second one, please. But for all those who joined us, thank you. Again, I'm your host, Scott Burgess. This is Healthcare 360. In front of us, you have the CEO of the Root Brands, Clayton Thomas. We will make sure all the links, the email, is it fair to share your email address, Clay?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'll just have them. They can go on chat, or we can put it on there. They can just email me directly or find me on Facebook, and
we'll make sure we put all those links in the podcast notes, so it's going to be easy for you to find. And we'd love to hear your stories. So everyone, thank you. Appreciate the best and brightest. We'll see you next time. Boom. Dude, this was fun.
And it's just conversation. Like, okay, where else do you want to go?
I know, right?
I got my notes. It's like I'm making notes as we go. So it's like, okay, got this. Let's hit on this. Let's do that.
Yeah.
There's so many pathways, and the more feedback we get from people, the more pathways open up, because you're like, this person said this or this person said this, and let's dive into that. Let's go here. Let's go here.
Yeah. No doubt.
That's what feeds me. So
cool,
get
man.
to it.
Yeah, man. We'll talk.
Appreciate it.
See you.
Cheers.
Bye.
All right.
If you like that clip, be sure to check out our daily videos of Healthcare 360 on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And while you're at it, don't forget to head on over to scotteburgess.com and sign up for our mailing list where you will get the latest and greatest in medtech, health tech, healthcare, and your personal well-being. We'll see you there.